Hello, my fellow photographers. This is Krish, a fine art photographer. I'm going to do some video today, and it was completely impromptu stuff. And I had this idea running for a week now, and I felt like, okay, I'll do an episode in advance due to I'm completing 3 years with my YouTube channel by August 23. I thought I would release a video for that. And so, what we are going to talk today, or what we are going to see in this episode, is about my software history of my software that I've used for photography ever since I started this. Okay, officially, maybe I would have started my photography journey by October of 2016, but before which I was practicing it as an hobby, like by 2011 or so, since 2011. So it was like that. So, as the idea of being a photographer was shaping up, so I thought I should share whatever thoughts that I had and all the experience that I had, with the softwares that I was trying to use for the purpose that I was trying to achieve, the image and the results that I was trying to achieve. Okay, so I could proudly say, let me stop you right there because I'm recording this about in the evening, like on like 5 o'clock and 12 minutes here in India. So it's a live environment. So you could expect many things to happen. So don't worry about all that. Don't get distracted. Just focus on whatever I'm saying and talking. Okay. So before even I was thinking of achieving what I want to do with my photographs, with the software treatment that I want to give it to my photographs. I've discussed this in one of my episodes called Fine Art Photography, wherein I would talk about how I achieved the particular results that I was, thinking about, and even in one episode after that, wherein I will show you some of the editing that I do usually for my photographs. Okay, so the kind of treatment was decided first before I even decided about the software that I'm going to use. Okay, so it all started with the inspiration later that came in, when I want to establish myself as a professional fine art photographer, or not even professional, or I would call it like full-time fine art photographer, or as a photographer, before which the inspiration for the treatment of my photographs came from Irving Penn's Picasso's photograph, because this particular photograph was a print, and it is a alternative printing process which is called platinum palladium print, and it was very inspiring for me at that time. I never heard of salt printing process and stuff. This was at the early during the beginning of 2016, before which I used to process my photograph in all possible ways with whatever softwares that was available with me, and don't confuse with particularly focusing on the software history. I'm going to be all over the place talking about whatever memories that I could get when I'm talking about a particular software or a particular incident or particular beginning or the mid or the end of this complete journey till today. So hope you guys don't mind. Grab whatever you can with this discussion that we are going to have today, and be happy with it. So when I in 2011, when I started, I had a Windows laptop, and the software came with it. We are going to discuss about the operating systems as well. So it was a Sony Vaio. It came with a Windows operating system, and it had Photoshop elements coming as a free software pre-installed in it. So that's why I bought that particular laptop. So I was buying it for my photography use. Okay, so I had couple more systems before to Sony Vaio, and I had something with Sony Vaio only, but it's a small ARM architecture processor, just usable for internet purposes. And the other one was my assembled desktop computer. So that had a small operating system which I kind of sourced with my friend or somebody who I knew, or from the internet. I did not know, some enterprise edition of Windows which was completely free. It did not have any key or anything. Okay, so and other softwares that was there with that desktop machine was I shouldn't be saying this, but yes, it was some pirated copies of Photoshop or Lightroom or any other software that I had that time. So I was not doing any freelance work with that software, so I was completely using it for learning purposes back then. But what I'm trying to say here is like try to avoid pirated softwares and try to use the genuine softwares, because like once I started using Photoshop elements with my Sony Vaio, I started realizing the use of genuine softwares in particular, because people in third world countries, they still have the practice of buying or paying it only for the hardware, and they generally get all the softwares for free from the people where they buy their assembled desktop computers. People who buy the laptops these days, they have the softwares pre-installed and it comes with the laptop. So other programs that they want, like Adobe Photoshop or Lightroom or etc regarding to photography or whatever they want to do, probably they might use a pirated version or the free version that is acquired from the internet, if I have to say, put it that way, than to make them feel guilty or being guilty of using something going illegal and stuff. So I don't know, people in the industry like giants like Adobe and other software manufacturers, they usually don't mind about the individuals. They only care about the group of people or the companies who are trying to use pirated stuff. Like when you are trying to make money out of their hard work, their softwares, and you're using it for free and making a huge amount of money. So they were usually after about the group of people or the companies. So in third world countries it's very normal. So even the companies that you will find, they will hire a bungalow instead of other factory unit, because they might have to pay different commercial current prices for that. If it is a bungalow or a house, they will have to pay standard price for the electricity, and they would buy licenses for just 10 or 15 computers, which is going to be present in the front living room of their bungalow, and the rest will be installed with all duplicate versions or like the pirated versions, including the softwares whatever they are using. I'm talking about the animation and all the companies which used to do flash animations back then. It's like a decade before. So even when the checking comes, like they will be inspecting only those 10 computers, and they'll be taking care of very well that they will write a clean sheet for these people. Okay, so the piracy was like so normal with the people back then, because like people cannot afford such softwares. Those were single time use softwares, like single purchase softwares. No subscriptions were there back then. So what I was talking about is like industry giants like Adobe and everything, they don't mind about the individuals. So people in India, in third world countries, when they usually pay for the hardware and they don't care about the operating system or the other programs that they want to use. Like they thought like it's the norm, it's the usual stuff that they do with it. So what happens is, like, because of this, you'll have a lot of people who are designers, who are photographers. They think like it's very affordable. Like you buy a DSLR for a basic DSLR for a basic price and start doing wedding photography, because like when you can afford for a computer or a machine for such less price, and you don't pay for the softwares, like you easily become the designated stuff that you want to do, and you start doing it. what happens because of this is like you kind of lower the prices of the market. Suppose a job is done for a certain price, you kind of lower the price for the competition or to just to get the job, because just because you're new in the market and you have everything that you want to do for that particular job, so you don't have the pressure of people who are actually genuinely buying stuff. Like they bought the paid for the hardware, they paid for the software. If there is a subscription, they paid for the subscription, and they paid for the insurances. They paid for the insurances of the hardware and the cameras and other associated softwares, everything. So they cannot come down in price, as the other people can. So these uh, people who are using pirated stuff, generally they kind of destroy the market. So they kind of bring the prices down, and it increases the lot of poor quality of work, results in poor quality of work, and because of which the software prices goes higher and higher every year, because they have less number of users. They cannot find people in third world countries with highly populated, dense populations are there, so they cannot go after every individual, right? So I would generally advise people to use some genuine softwares. So because of the piracy, you may not know the value of job that you're doing. So that is what I want to highlight here. And I was always using it for learning purposes, so there is nothing to worry about it. If at all I have a job, I usually had some other system to take care of. So with my Sony Vaio Photoshop elements, I usually edited, and I used to have GIMP also. So I have a GIMP here. So this software was available for Windows also. So I used to experiment with various softwares as well, GIMP and Photoshop elements, and back then, and I was having no particular formula or any sort of cosmetic standard style of creating or treatment for my photographs. So it had various crops, it had various appearances and style. After all, deciding, like I need to be a photographer, like when I quit my job and everything, when I started photography, I'm sorry, I'm sweating like a pig. Even the AC is still on, I'm sweating like a pig. So when I started my photography, I just had that Vaio laptop, and I was very sure that I don't want to use my desktop computer, which had some other softwares, which is not I'm not proud of saying that I have them with me. So I don't want to use that. I want to use all legal stuff. So that's when I started, and with my Sony Vaio. And when I encountered this photograph, that's when my Sony Vaio was failing because of the hinge and all the fan and the heating element, that cooling element that it had. So the hinge had the display wires running very close to the heat containing shields or the copper plates that was there over, which was covering the fan. So it kind of destroyed the plug and the connection circuit over there. So it was failing whenever I close and open my Vaio. So Vaio kind of stopped working back then. So I had to make a choice, and I want to be clean, and I want to start with a clean sheet. I want to be everything legal. I don't want to be guilty of what I'm using in the later stage, and I don't want to be destroying the field of photography for myself, selfishness, because I want to be a photographer. So I thought, why not I use all the available softwares in the market, which is available for free access, in being in the third world country, and taking that advantage and doing that. I don't want to do that. I was very clear about that, even when I had a very poor start with the finances of my photography and stuff. So what happened was, like, back then, when Sony Vaio completely was dead, I couldn't even take that operating system and put that on my desktop computer, because that was meant for that laptop, and it had the license key defined and designed for that. So I cannot use it on my desktop computer. So what I did is, like, I chose a big leap back then. and I want to be completely legal and fresh and everything all good. So I wiped out my desktop computer, whatever that was there, and I started working on with Linux operating systems. So I had various Linux operating systems. So by means, like when I got into Linux operating system, I was no more a user of Adobe products. I was not using Adobe Photoshop. I was not using Adobe Lightroom. I was not using Adobe Photoshop Elements. Okay, so is it possible to become a photographer without using any of these, which is considered to be the industry standards? You know, the Lightroom, Photoshop, and whatever that is told to be the norms of the industry. I guess I'm the living example here for now. I'm not so proud of it, but because I've been having some mood swings and I was, in and on and off on using Lightroom and Photoshop. I'll talk about that later in this episode. So I would say like I'm not using Adobe products at all. So when I was into Linux, I was obviously looking for a Linux version of Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. Obviously, they don't do one for Linux operating system. So I got to source and look for softwares which will work in Linux operating systems. Okay, so this is all starting in 2016. So by which there were two things very clear for me. One is like what is the cosmetic treatment or the treatment that I'm going to give in the software for my photographs. As you see, the platinum palladium look, which I got inspired from Irving Penn's Pablo Picasso's, forgive me, which I got inspired from Irving Penn's Pablo Picasso's photograph. So, and I'm going to use a Linux operating system, all legal software. So, two things were clear back then in 2016. So, when I was trying to source all the softwares that I needed, I need to be very clear about the cosmetic treatment and the result that I wanted. So it is going to be something like this. The look I want to shoot or the look that I want to create in the post is going to be a black and white photograph, and the end result is going to be something like platinum palladium. So in the mid of 2016 or so, okay, after I deciding all those things, I actually tried doing salt printing or some alternative printing processes. So I did try silver nitrate, silver gelatin printing process, the other salt printing process, like the one that involves only silver nitrate solution and some sort of toning with selenium and stuff like that. So I did try them, and the idea of trying those salt printing processes was like to have the gallery that you see here today, like whatever the gallery that you see here in my Flickr page or Fine Art America page, it was supposed to be the scans of the print that I made with the salt printing processes. So it's say like cali-type, platinum palladium, or palladium, palladiotype, or gum printing, carbon printing process, various alternative printing processes. Such these galleries are supposed to be the scans of those prints, and it's going to be there for the sale. So in that way, I'm very secure about the plagiarism or piracy of my photographs being, like internet frauds and stuff. Like people take my photographs and print and benefit for their own. So I could avoid such things. That was the initial plan. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford the salt printing process because it was too expensive in India, to afford a UV light unit with the timer and everything, and to acquire those salt printing solutions, like 10 ml of a few things would cost huge sum of money. A small kit of platinum palladium from Bosticks and Sullivan would cost around 20,000 Indian rupees. So, after all the shipment and all the GSTs, or GST wasn't there before, but yeah, after all the taxes and import duties and shipment charges and everything, it will round a little more than 20,000. So it was not viable. Why? Because like a small platinum palladium kit would give about 35 or 36 8 by 10 prints. Okay, 8 by 10 is something like an A4 sheet, like something like this A4 size print for a platinum palladium thing. And if you want to achieve a particular photograph and a good result of that particular photograph, so you might have to note down the points of all the burn and dodge that you do when you were exposing the print. And to achieve the best results, you might have to print many times that particular photograph, for which you will need more solutions. Say for now you need to first figure out the exposure time for each print of the solid printing process. So you might have to expose it in covering up the photograph in various shades. You will expose it for longer time, lesser time, and all that. You will need more solutions for that. And after that, you will need a vacuum chamber wherein to process the paper that you are going to finally print upon. And you might need a proper exposure unit, and then to store all the prints that you have made, proper vacuum storage, or at least a shelf with wherein you other insects won't get into your prints and everything, to store that prints and everything. It was way too expensive than what I am planning for, so I couldn't do this all printing process. But I'll show you how the actual gallery should have been looking like. This is from Wolfgang Morris. I follow him on Flickr, and he has a Facebook page as well, and I think he is on other social media. So this is whatever you see in this gallery is all of solid print. It's not the actual photograph, it's the alternative printing process made print and the scans of those print. Okay, he does lot of varieties of prints. Okay, so he does a lot of nature photographs, table props, architecture and stuff like that. So my gallery was supposed to look like this, like if not for everything, something like this. Whatever you see, this is the outer the way you brush your solution onto your paper. So something like this. Okay, so what he has done is, like, he had done some Cali type prints with gold toning. Gold toning is like making use of actual gold in the solution, so that's still expensive. Even a 10% solution would cost more. So this is some Palladio type printing, okay, on a different paper. This one is like a scan of that print. Okay, so this is again a Palladio type on a animal paper, and every paper has some textures, grains. You have a lot of things to dig about and learn about the papers itself when you're doing alternative printing process. So this one is like platinum print, and this one is like Cali type with sodium acetate developer and stuff like that. And this is pure platinum palladium print. Why platinum palladium print? It's because, like, it has a very incredible shelf life. Okay, so it would stay there for the life of the paper. So if you're going to preserve the paper for 1,000 years, the platinum palladium print is going to stay for 1,000 years. Number two, the grays that you will find, defined by our one of the greatest nature photographer or photographer in sense, like Adam. So as he defined the zone system and everything, the grays and all the dark to the brightest area that you will find, the tonal range that you will find in any sort of solid printing, that which is done in a very very messy situations and table, like that, you will get it for in a wide range. Actually, you will get a wonderful tonal range in the images. The shelf life is very long, and the print looks amazing as it develops. Okay, so there is one more printing method developed by Bostix and Sullivan which I like, which is called Zia type printing process. In platinum palladium, naturally you won't see the print as it was exposed. In Zia type, you will actually see the actual look of the print as it develops. I mean, as you are exposing it to the UV light. Okay, so for now I'll close all this windows to save the memory, because we have been looking at this for quite a long time. So I think that will do. So my gallery was also supposed to look like that, the scans of the solid printing process. So what I was trying to say through this is, like, I have decided about the cosmetic treatment of my photographs, the treatment that I'm going to give it through the softwares, even before I decided the software. Okay, what kind of software that I'm going to use. I've decided how my photograph is going to look like, even before using a certain particular software. So I was very sure about using only genuine copies of software. So that's when I was trying to use a Linux operating system. I was starting with the usual popular Linux distributions. So there were a lot of the Linux distributions available for you to use it on your computer. I was trying to use it on my desktop computer, which is like what do you call that? Assembled computer, and it's all AMD configuration. So the processor is AMD, the graphic card is AMD, the motherboard is supportive of both those two, and the RAM was of a different company. Okay, so it had about 8 GB of RAM and around 4 GB of graphics memory and 6 core processor, Phoenix processor. But these are all configuration and specs which I bought it in 2011. Okay, so this I was deciding about using Linux operating system on 2016 or so. Okay, so that's when I started. By the mid of August and all, I've started using Linux operating system in my computer. So I was trying various Linux operating systems. As I said, there were millions of them, and I was trying with the popular ones, something like Ubuntu Linux, and Ubuntu is very common among the Linux operating system for people to use because it's readily available as a ISO image, and it has a very good, beautiful GUI which imitates the Mac OS GUI. I mean, like graphical user interface. Whatever you see, you have a bar like this, and you have the browsing window, you have a menu bar, something like that. I like more of a Mac OS GUI than the Windows GUI. So there are Linux distributions which kind of give you the user experience that you wanted, as you have been using Windows operating system as well. So I don't want that. So I was trying for some GUI which is more Mac OS like. You can use that and stuff like that. So I was using Ubuntu Linux for about 6 months or 7 months. Like I have to reinstall the operating system several times because it would crash after 2 or 3 updates. Within 2 months. So there is a constant update running for your Linux operating system. That's more advantage for you. It's very secured as well. So it's Unix, right? Basically. So and the all the what I would say. The programmers, the coders would always love to, type in the command prompt or the terminal, as they call, to get the results, to update, to install a software, everything, like that pleasure is incredible. Actually, I experienced it only after using Linux operating system. It's not like I've not used Linux before. I did use, but I was not using it as my only operating system, like my daily driver. So I gave a try with Ubuntu for 6 to 7 months, and it was not coping up well with the AMD configuration of hardware. So I had to try various other Linux distributions which would go well with the AMD configuration hardware, which I had it with me. So other Linux operating system which I tried was like again Ubuntu, the multimedia version, which would have all the softwares pre-installed. I mean, like for your audio engineering, for your editing, for your image editing, for your video editing, for your 3D graphics requirements and everything. It would be all the softwares, necessary softwares, which is available in Linux. Linux, whatever platform that you are using, the type of Linux that you are using. The multimedia version of any particular operating system would have all this pre-installed. You don't have to go source, install other elements that is required for your computer. I mean, the hardware that you have, or sourcing all the drivers that you need to put it for that particular software to work in your Linux machine. You don't have to do all that, things that give you a headache. So it comes pre-installed, but even that one crashed. So I was trying other Linux distributions as well, OpenSUSE, Cinnamon operating system. Like it had a different version of the base OS. The kernel was a different kernel, and finally I settled up for Fedora.